Good morning, children. I hope you all are fine. Children, today we are going to start a new topic. I'm going to teach you poem 1, Dust of Snow today. It is written by or composed by Robert Frost, a very famous poet. So, children, before I start the poem, I would like to give the introduction of the poet. And I think every student of literature must know about Robert Frost. Robert Lee Frost. His time period was March 26, 1874 to January 29, 1963. He was an American poet who was much admired for his depictions of the rural life of New England, his command of American colloquial speech, and his realistic verse portraying ordinary people in everyday situations. He was one of the most popular and critically respected American poets of the 20th century. He was honored frequently during his lifetime, receiving 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry. He became one of Americans' rare public literary figures, almost an artistic institution. He was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 1960 for his political works. And children, at a very early age, he lost his father. So he had taken all the financial or commercial responsibilities of the family even, right? So he was working as a school teacher, but he did not kill his interest of writing. He kept on doing that, right? And I think that spirit everybody must have, right? Now children, what does this poem talks about? So this poem talks about change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. So Dust of Snow is a short and beautiful poem which is written by Robert Frost. And change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Meaning to say, it is a motivating poem that tells us how our view of perceiving things changes our mind. Okay? Change the way you look at things means change the way you perceive the things. So, how our view of perceiving things changes our mind and puts a greater impact on our lives. And the things you look at change. By enjoying the simple moments of life, we can get rid of our day-to-day problems and worries. So this also helps us in living a happy and healthy life. Now let's talk about the poem. The poem describes a very simple happening in very simple words. That the poet has mentioned in this poem that a crow, snow, and a hamlet tree, they are described as the depressive and sorrowful mood of the poet. The crow, snow, and a hamlet tree, they are considered as negative references in the poem, and they are compared with the depressed mood of the poet. So it tells us that sometimes even a small incident may prove to be a larger significance. Of course, the poem, it shows that how small incidents in our life or small happenings in our life, it has larger significance in our life. And the poet is upset in the beginning, it is mentioned, but a small incident of falling of snow changes his mood totally. So this is all what we are going to discuss in the poem, that how was the poet's mood in the beginning and what all has changed the poet's mood in the end of the poem, right? So in the end of the poem, the poet feels relaxed and thankful to the nature, because nature is responsible for saving his day and for saving his life. Next, theme and central idea. So now children, the central idea of the poem Dust of Snow is that one may have the worst day or time in his life, but a little good thing can make it quite amazing. Children, many times it happens in our life that we face difficult times, but sometimes it happens that something good happens to us and it changes our mind, it changes our mood, right? And it creates something good in our life, right? So that is, that saves our time as well as our life. So the crow and the hamlet tree and the dust are some bad signs or negative references that the poet is talking about in this poem, that normally make the people believe that something wrong is going to happen. But how these things have brought positivity in the life of the poet, that we are going to discuss. So the poet in the poem, I think, is already upset, that we have already discussed that in the beginning he was upset. That is the reason he comes out of his home to wander in the snow. But a crow has done something which resulted into the fall of snow and on the poet, which has made him happy, right? So the poem gives us the message that one should hope for the best even in the worst. Like negative and negative makes positive in mathematics. Similarly, in real life, we can make or we can enjoy in our worst times, right? Now children, let's begin the text. So the title of the poem is Dust of Snow. Now dust of snow are the small particles or the small flakes of snow. So that means flakes of snow or small particles of the snow. Okay, so the poet says that the way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree. The poet began the poet says that the way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree. Now what happens to the poet? The poem is actually set in a scene where the poet is in a bad mood, where the poet is upset with something, right? And he's walking by a tree. And which tree? A hemlock tree. Hemlock tree is a poisonous tree, children. So as the poet passes by, what happens? As the poet passes by a hemlock tree, what happens? A crow happens to throw something on the poet. The way a crow, the poet is talking about the way or the manner in which a crow shook down on me. Now me here refers to the poet and shook is the past form of shake, right? So the poet says that what happens, he was walking by a tree which is named as hemlock, and then he was highly upset with something. The reason for being upset is not specified in the poem, it is unknown. All right, so suddenly what happened, a crow was sitting on a hemlock tree, right? And a crow had shaken the branches of the tree, and which resulted in the fall of dust of what? Snow, right? So when a crow had shaken the branches of the tree, the dust of snow or the flakes of snow or small particles of snow, they fell down on the poet. Now children, it is not specified or it's not clear whether they fell on the head of the poet or the shoulders of the poet. That is purely unknown. Okay, and also the specific action of a crow is not mentioned here. The poet is only talking about the action of the crow, that it had shaken the branches of the tree. Now it's actually not clear whether the crow was landing or it was shivering with cold or it was readjusting itself on the branch or taking off. So it happened whatever it was doing. Alright, whatever it was doing, it had shaken the branches of the tree, which resulted, or it happened to send some particles of snow upon the author, okay, or on the poet. So here the poet is talking about the two agents of nature. One is the hamlet tree and the other is the crow. And these two agents of nature, the hamlet tree and the crow, are signifiers of sadness and gloom. Just like the poet's mood was in the opening scene. What was the mood of the poet in the opening scene? In the starting of the poem, we have discussed that the poet was in a bad mood. And how we have come to know about this fact? As you know, in the starting it is nowhere mentioned. But in the second stanza, it is clearly mentioned that has given my heart a change of mood. So a change of mood, meaning to say, and in this in second stanza, it is also mentioned that that act had saved some part of the poet's day. So through that, we have come to know that the poet was not in a good mood in the beginning. All right. Now, the next stanza. It has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of the day I had rued. Now has given my heart. Now my here refers to the poet, right? So the poet says that has given my heart a change of mood. So what has given a change of mood to the poet's heart? The action done by the crow. Children, we all know that the reason of the poet's bad mood is actually unknown. Alright, the author had a terrible day, and why he had that terrible day or why he was upset, that is not mentioned. But the falling of the snow, the poet is saying the falling of the snow on his head or on his shoulder, it had lifted his mood instantly. All right. So he and further he says that and saved some part of a day I had rued, which he had the part of the day held in regret, right? So he says that he had already spent his day in a bad mood, but the rest of it was saved by the crow and the hemlock tree. Children, it happens with all of us that when we are in a bad mood or when we are in a depressing state or sad, what happens, or when we are troubled with something, so what happens basically? We always try to find out the solution of the problem, and sometimes it happens that it becomes very difficult for us to come out of that state, right? So that particular time or at that point, our friend helps us to come out of that state, or our family member, or we come across some lines in the book, right? So something we come across who helps us or which helps us to come out of that state. Or sometimes it happens with the people that they are unable to come out of that state, right? And the results are of course disastrous in that situation, right? But the poet was lucky enough that this small act of the crow had saved not only the time or the rest of the day of the poet, but it has also saved his life, right? Otherwise he would have taken some wrong action if he was failed to come out of that depression, right? So generally the poet here says that he had already spent some part of his day in regret, okay, or in regret or in a bad mood, but the rest of the day it was saved by one simple act of the crow and the hemlock tree, all right, which was covered with that snow. So generally hemlock tree and crow are used for negative references, but the poet used them beautifully to portray that inauspicious things can bring joy and happiness too. One must not take things for granted, and should be open and accept whichever way the nature chooses to bless us. Alright, this is something very, very important the poet is trying to teach us. The poet is saying that one must not take things for granted. We must not take things for granted, and we should be open, and we should accept whichever way the nature chooses to bless us. Now these two things, hemlock tree which is considered as a poisonous tree and a crow, children, we all know that people consider them as negative references, right? So they are considered as bad omen. Especially you might have heard about a crow, that it is considered as a bad omen. But what happens? What happens through this poetry? If the poet wanted, the poet would have taken the example of, or would have mentioned some other, beautiful bird in the poem, like nightingale or cuckoo or some other bird. Or if the poet wanted, the poet would have taken the example of some beautiful trees like oak tree, maple, etc. But why the poet had taken the example of these two negative references? Just to teach us, or just to teach the readers that nothing we have to consider as negative. Even these negative things can bring positivity in our lives. So we'll have to change our, it's a high time to change our outlook, to change our state of mind. This is what we have discussed in the beginning after the introduction of the poet, right? That we have to change our state of mind, that how we perceive the things, how we look at the things, right? Okay. So this is all about the poem. Now let's recapitulate the things, and just before that I would like to discuss literary devices with you all. Firstly, we'll discuss about the title, the significance of the title. So the title of the poem Dust of Snow is quite relevant to the main theme. Why it is relevant or to the main theme? Because as you know, it changes the mood of the poem completely. The title is Dust of Snow, and dust of snow plays a major role in the poem because it is completely responsible for changing the mood of the poet. Initially, the poet was not in a good mood. In the starting of the poem, we have discussed that the poet was not in a good mood, but and he was regretting. Okay, and but however, when the dust of snow falls on him, he experiences a change of mood. His mood and his feelings, they got changed. So from that sad state, he became happy, right? And he remained cheerful throughout the day. Right, Peter? Okay. So, what you have learnt through this poetry, the poet wants to say that, this poem, Dust of Snow, children, it shows that how nature can cheer people, right? By putting their problems in perspective and reminding them of the world outside their own heads. But rather than staging this idea as some grand revelation, this poem depicts it on a smaller way, that a crow in a hemlock tree, on a hemlock tree shakes snow down onto the passing speaker, that is the poet, in a surprise that seems to heighten, or that seems to lighten the day's troubles. Alright? So the poet got rid of his troubles, his worries, his problems. Alright? Okay. So, the poem actually leaves much unsaid. But the speaker or the poet clearly sees this dust of snow as significant, as something important. And this suggests that even in its smallest actions, nature has something to teach humanity. And what is that? If perhaps only through its indifference to human problems. So this is what nature is teaching us in this poetry. We consider these creatures of nature, a crow or a hamlet tree, as negative references, but they are the ones, a crow and hamlet tree, they have brought, or they were responsible for bringing, for saving the life of the poet and for bringing positivity in the poet's life. So that's all about the poem. Now children, I would like to discuss literary devices or the poetic devices in the poem. So the rhyme scheme of the poem is A B A B C D C D, and then we have the use of alliteration in the poem. Now children, alliteration, I suppose everybody understands. It's the occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. So that you can see in first example, H sound or H letter has been repeated, has given my heart. And in the second line, and saved some path, S sound and S letter has been repeated, right? Now the next one, we have metaphor, inversion, assonance, enjambment. So inversion is when the structure of a sentence is changed by the poet to create rhyme. So this poetic license is called inversion, and you can see the example in stanza 1. Alright, inversion can be seen in stanza 1. Now next we have assonance. So now what is assonance? Assonance means the prominence of a vowel sound throughout the line. It is called assonance. So you can see in stanza 1 and line 2, shook down on me. So you can see children that O sound is prominent here, right? So this is an example of assonance. And next we have enjambment. Now what is enjambment? It has been used throughout the poem, because when the enjambment is something, when the same sentence continues to the next line without the use of any punctuation mark. Children, you all know that punctuation marks are important to apply, right? So when the same sentence continues to the next line without the use of any punctuation marks, so it is called enjambment, right? So it has been used throughout the poem. Okay? And then we have metaphor. So metaphor is left. So metaphor, this rhetorical device is used when a covert comparison is made between two different things or ideas. And in this poem, the poet uses the device of metaphor in the third line of the first stanza, when he compares the mass of snowflakes. Okay, when he compares the mass of snowflakes atop the hamlet tree with dust. Alright, so mass of snowflakes are compared with dust. Alright, so this is an example of metaphor. And the last one, we can say that irony. Irony is also there in the poem. That irony, it's a contrast between reality and expectation, between what is said and what is meant, between what appears to be true and what's the real truth. Alright? So there is a bit of irony here, that the poet refers to the poisonous hamlet tree, which is used for medicinal purpose also. Right? So okay. Now children, so which is used for medicinal purpose, and on the other hand, the poet is saying that hamlet tree is poisonous. That is the reason it is ironical. So that's all for today, children. Now in next class, we'll be taking a new topic. Thank you so much. God bless you all.